Today we're going to veer off the regular path to review a Moog guitar. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Now, I know what you're thinking, but no, this is not Brendon's stolen guitar, but it is that model that we were talking about. So it was really strange timing for all this, because a viewer of the show that goes by Paul L reached out to me and said, hey, do you have any interest in a Moog E-1 sustainer guitar? And at that point in time, I didn't know anything about this instrument. In fact, I didn't even think I'd ever saw one. But then when the Brendon Small sale happened, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I did know about these things. But we get to review this one today. So if you're not familiar with Moog, they are primarily a synthesizer company. And they partnered with Gibson back in the 70s and 80s to create the Artist series of instruments that had a bunch of cool built-in effects. But during Summer NAMM of 2008, they came out with a brand new electric guitar just of their own. It was called the Paul Vo Collector's Edition. It had a beautiful, bustling figured top with matching headstock veneers as well as the coloring, and you could find them in a plethora of hues. From a darker blue to an aqua blue, I've seen some trans ambers, honey bursts, and more sunburst. Those were pretty cool, but they were expensive, $6,500. Gotta remember, that's market crash 2008 time period. So about 1 year later, they released the E-1. This is like standard production level of the collector's edition. This time, though, they're about half the price at $3,495 brand new. They took away the figure top and offered them in 3 official colors: candy red, trans butterscotch, and black. However, everything else is about the same as far as our pickups, as well as the construction goes, as far as I understand it. Remember, I'm far from an expert on this particular model. This is just, based on a quick little internet research. But as far as a brand new guitar design goes, I like it. It's familiar to a Stratocaster. Now, if you actually compare it side by side, it's not quite as wide and they've shrunk it a tad. And most importantly, no bolt-on neck construction. It is a sit neck with a super access heel carve. And as far as designing a new headstock, it's not completely atrocious. It honestly looks a lot like a Parker Fly, with the whole half of the headstock being black. But check out the body on this thing. It actually comes down in this area, and then you have this like pickguard-esque design. I was really happy it was the Butterscotch that we get to review, because as far as I understand it, the other ones are solid colors, whereas this one you get to see through to the wood grain, and that's the best part of a guitar to me. So okay, we understand the guitar. That's all fine and dandy, but it's Moog. What have they done? These pickups remind me a lot of the Fender Performer. We reviewed one of those in this episode. They have that interesting slanted design. This has a similar thing going on, but they are designed by Moog and they do very different things. We'll go over all this more in depth in the playing demo as well as on the Workbench, but the best way to think about this instrument is it's an infinite sustaining guitar. Very similar to the product called E-Bow, except for you don't have to hold it in your hand. All that technology is built in within our pickups. But besides just adding energy to the strings, it can also take it away for a more plucky staccato sound. So we're gonna have some fun, because we even have like some built-in wah filters and stuff. So yeah, but with the guitar came a case. It says Moog on the outside. Feels really custom made. Like they have this nice foam on the interior. It's not soft, it's very rigid, but you have these additional channels over here because this guitar, similar to a Firebird X or whatnot, but maybe a little bit more simple, came with a controllable foot switch with MIDI imports that helps control and alter your filters to be more of a wah-like pedal, as well as a bunch of other things that we'll try to demonstrate today. Looks like I've got a Neutrik MIDI cable that might come in handy, as well as something that looks like a power supply. And anything else in here? Looks like some setup tools and Allen wrenches in here. An extra set of Moog guitar strings. You have to use specialized strings on these for best results. And you saw that right, infinite sustain with whammy. Yep. Although these were also available in hardtail. Now, originally, these did actually have a COA, but I'm missing it on this one. So, hey, I guess I'm glad I bought the Brendon Small one, because you can see all that other paperwork from when we unboxed that in this unboxing episode. Now, this one's not $525, it's $351. So to learn more about this interesting beast, let's go ahead and throw it over onto the Workbench to take a detailed look at all of its parts, and then we will get to a playing sample. inside the Moog guitar. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff to say the least. But let's start with these pickups. You've got this interesting parallelogram design with rounded off corners going on. But you might have noticed that we don't have any type of a pickup ring around here. They're actually very similar to the 2018-ish high-performance Gibson series. They get screwed in from the back. But what was really interesting to me is these are plastic screws. And as far as what they look like on the underside, they just appear to be epoxy coated, and they have these 3 legs on the bottom side, likely sank into that same coating, but that's what those screws go into then. From there, they've got multiple wires coming out of the pickup, then oddly, like a bunch of tape over top of them. I don't want to get too rough with this because I don't want to disturb this wire. But inside the cavity itself, it might look really nice and clean, but that's because that's a big foam block. With a little bit more light, you can see that more clearly. But those 3 posts go inside of that and then get screwed into place. So in other words, there's nothing for you in these cavities. Unless you are producing a YouTube show like mine, leave them alone. Because the bridge pickup and its cavity are the exact same. And if you're hoping to get readings within the circuit, no. You just wait till you see the back. I think you'll understand why that. But when I first threw this onto the workbench, I was like, nah, that's some really ugly craftsmanship here. What's with all these bubbles? But then I noticed all these labelings are actually on a little vinyl. You can take that off technically, and it is also black under there. So once you memorize the guitar, that's actually really nice to know that you can just have that clean butterscotch and ebony look. But for us, that's really helpful. So master volume, self-explanatory. Vo power, that's what we were talking about earlier. That's how much energy it adds to the strings. It's important to note that both of these are just regular pots. The next one, harmonic balance, actually has a +5, a 0 position that it kind of clicks into, and then a -5. We'll have to toy around with that to see what that's all doing. But filter toggle, you have a 3 position switch right here. I believe the up position makes this just like a regular tone knob, whereas then you have an articulator as well as a ladder filter that you can control the intensity of with this knob. So if you don't need any of the wah or other effects, just leave it in the position that makes that regular. And then our last knob here, as it implies, it's the piezo blend, meaning how much of the acoustic saddle pickup tones do you want with your electric guitar sounds? Because then we have some blade switches over here. Mode selector, let's see, 1, 2, 3. This is a 3-way, so you got 3 modes. Our first one, I believe, is full sustain. That is going to make every single note you play sustain forever. I believe your middle one is then a controlled sustain. So the way I'm interpreting that before ever playing this from the spec page is it actively mutes any string that you're not touching and sustains just those notes. But this last one is mute mode. That's when the pickups are removing energy from the string, so that'll be fun. And then this guy up here is your regular 5-way selector switch. However, it's a little bit different. Up, it's your neck, like normal. Your next 2 are your middle positions. So after your first one, this is your regular middle. The pickups are in phase. The middle will then be them being out of phase, whereas your 4th position is just the bridge pickup, and then all the way down, you're going to your very last pickup, it's piezo only. But the bridge itself is a Wilkinson design, and then you've got the Graphtec piezo saddles. So if we were to remove this, there's probably wires coming out of each of these, or it's on a different circuit board. But Wilkinson trems are pretty cool. Even the arm, just looking at it, I thought it was a push-in style and then you lock it down, but no. It is a threaded arm, so you want to go ahead and screw that into place. But if you have a preferred location, you can set lock it too. But then in typical Moog fashion, they've got their name over here, right under the bridge, and it is a metallic logo. But now let's take some time just to focus on the body. You can see some cool wood grain and all of our other colorations. But now as far as our dimensions, we already talked about how it wasn't as wide as a Stratocaster. Those official measurements are, I'd say it's about 10.5 at the widest parts going slightly diagonal and 12 inches at our bottom bout, with the entire body being about 15 inches. But it really is quite a chunky guitar, and there's a reason for that, a bunch of electronics in it. But at its thickest point, 1.84 inches. But please don't forget, you've got a comfort cut on the back, you've got an arm contour. It's not always just that blocky, but I kind of like it. It reminds me of a Telecaster, just in a Stratocaster's body. And perhaps here's a better visual of what we were talking about earlier of how the body actually falls down right here. I really like that. It gives all of our knobs a much lower profile, because that would look kind of ridiculous sticking off of the top of the guitar. Speaking of which, though, here's where your MIDI goes in, and your output jack is actually recessed at a slight angle over there. So far, condition-wise, it looks like some of the pressure from the bridge, it's not necessarily chipped to the finish. You can just tell it's slightly ugly over there. Similar phenomenon over here by our neck joint. Otherwise, I just noticed a few small surface level scuffs and polishing swirls. I don't think this one was heavily gigged by any means. But now let's talk about our fretboard. Please keep in mind, this is the only one of these I've ever had in the flesh. So maybe it's a you example, or maybe it's a Moog making guitars example. I noticed two things. A, what on earth is going on with our last fret? Why is it diagonal? Here's a straight edge next to the other frets, and yeah, this one's for some reason crooked. Maybe that has something to do with a small thing of intonation for that last string, or perhaps that's going to cause problems. Or perhaps it's a feature I just don't know about. I'm just reporting it. I also saw like a small gouge into the fretboard right there. That might just be a workmanship type thing, because I saw a similar one over here on the board after I conditioned and cleaned it. I also gave these frets a nice little shine. This, I'm not sure if they accidentally got some lacquer on it or it just had something else, but that did not come off after a cleaning and new conditioning. But here's the biggest thing. These frets, they're ridiculously sharp on the end. Like, don't get me wrong, the initial fret job, it's great. It's perfect, nice and balled over, but I'm talking this flat bit. It's raised just a tad, and there's a ridge you can feel that's extra sharp. I don't know if the frets might have started to sprout off of this, because I did notice it was really buzzy, but the neck also had an up bow, so I'm going to see after that little setup I did if it plays better when we get the strings back on. So if you own one of these, please let me know. Are the very ends of your frets also sharp right there? However, as far as the ebony fretboard, my goodness, they have that completely sanded, super smooth. Reminds me of those Japanese Fenders. It's a great neck outside of the sharpness if you feel this way. I think as far as playing will be okay, but I'm going to be careful. Otherwise, our only inlay is at the 12th fret. It's the first O in Moog, done up in abalone shell. If you're curious about the side marker inlays, they just appear to be kind of a bone-looking color, so they're not matching abalone is what I'm trying to get at. But I measure 1.67 inches at the nut, increasing to 2.08 at the 12, 0.79 per fret neck depth, and 0.93 at the 12. The official spec page called it a modified C-shape profile. To me, it feels like a normal C, but maybe a little bit flatter on the back. There's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Definitely a bit more rounded at the beginning, and then you can kind of tell what I was talking about, a bit more flat at the 12th. Now, jumping up to our headstock. The truss rod's your basic import-like style one that utilizes an Allen wrench. The truss rod cover itself is interesting though. This one still has a protective plastic coating over it. It's like the nose of an airplane, I guess you could say. Very understated. And just like the face of the body, they also carved that down, painted it black, and put the Moog branding right there, also done up in abalone. There's a good shot of showing you that ledged ridge. I suppose here's another way to show you how deep it drops. All right, got it back strung up, messed around with the truss rod a little bit more. Finally got the neck straight. The neck just always wanted to bump up like that. That tells me this probably sat in its case without string tension for a while. But she's looking good now. Now, after careful inspection, at one point in time, that probably was flush with the fretboard. But humidity and all that other good stuff has its way of making things sprout, so you just need to clean up the very edge, and this would be more comfortable. And I remembered I forgot to capture this. It's a 25.5-inch scale length, but the radius is a bit different. It's 12.59 inches. Why? I have no idea. So just a little bit more rounded than what you're seeing here. And I also noticed this while putting it back together. 2 of your knobs are black chrome, the other 3 are regular chrome. Perhaps that's to distinguish between the main controls of your pickups and the filters and other special features. Because if you look closely at your blade switches, you've got a black tip and a chrome looking tip. So I guess that's a color code system as to which knobs go for which one. But oh boy. Yeah, it's just like those old Gibson Artist series guitars. If you want to check one of those out, here's an interesting Super Artist. Although the board looks way more complicated than on those, and maybe a little bit more modernized, but you still have your Moog Music branding over here. And I wish I could take this out for you and show you all the other stuff, but I thought, hey, let's look at our backplate, and I see do not touch the circuit board, so I'm going to listen to that and not show you the underside. But you can see some of your toggle switch wirings here. And while I could bring the endoscope out, I don't think we're going to see anything pertinent in there anyway. Pretty much the only thing I know how to explain is, you see these wires right here? On the end of your trem block, those were those piezo saddle wires that I was talking about. And those appear to plug into the PCB right over here. So if they ever got damaged by this, I guess you could replace it easy enough. But I found it interesting how they have the springs and then they just kind of bolt into the guitar there. In many of my reviews, I like to block off the trems, but I'm not exactly sure how to do that on this one with damaging stuff. So I apologize in advance for potential tuning instability. But here you can see those outputs as we were looking at earlier. This does indeed have its own separate battery compartment. That's nice having its own separate door because, let's just say, again, unless you're a YouTube show that documents the internals of guitars, there's no need to ever take that back plate off if everything's working properly. In fact, I would highly suggest against it because let's just say that wasn't exactly form fit. You really have to bend this a little bit and press down to get it back in. In fact, there's even a little area where you can see they shaved some plastic off of the back plate to make it fit. So again, nice to have that feature. And that's where those plastic screws go in to secure the pickups. So that means the height adjustments of the pickups are determined by how tightly you have those screwed into place. But now let's take a second to appreciate its design. They really sculpt away that heel back here. It nearly looks like it would be a neck-through guitar, but no, the spec sheet calls it a set neck. But it is very blocky up here on the upper horns, as we were talking about earlier. And then you get that comfort cut and all your other goodness down here. But it has to be that thick due to all of the fancy electronics. But what's really fascinating here is the body is a gloss finish. You can see it reflect in the light quite heavily. Whereas the neck, they've dulled it down into a satin, and there's that very obvious transition area right here. I am really shocked. I cannot feel a ledge necessarily between the gloss and the satin. However, there's a huge feel difference. That said, this feels like one of those satin finishes that's not going to easily buff up and show areas of high traffic. Now, eventually will it? Yeah, probably. But it's one of those almost semi-gloss ones that's just been taken down a little bit. But that's an alder body with a maple neck that I'll further revise their spec sheet to let you know it is a 3-piece maple neck. So you've got 3 pieces of wood laminated together there. One has some rings, one's a bit knotty, and the other one's got more rings. And as far as the tuners, these are actually locking style. So that's a nice feature to have for this time period. But now the backside of the headstock is interesting. So we already know the Moog guitar model E1, our serial number 351, but it says assembled in the USA, but that doesn't mean it was made in the USA. It could be that this is indeed an import neck that was glued into an import body, finished all in there, but assembling means maybe they put the complicated electronics in the United States. It could also just be that they got the necks and the bodies, they slapped them together. I don't know for this one. Feel free to fill us in the comments, but everything I'm seeing here looks like an import guitar to me. Something that I would expect today to be in the 1500-ish range. Because so far, yeah, it feels like a nice guitar if you're into that more boutique look. But the reason you get one of these is for its music making capabilities. So can't wait to try that out a little further. But all said and done, the Moog E-1 weighs 8 pounds, 0.5 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and see what kind of shenanigans I can get up to. Now, before we can hear these sweet tones, I want to explain how to actually hook this up because I had a pretty difficult time. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm not connecting this to a keyboard or synthesizer for additional effects, I don't need to use the MIDI. That's incorrect. That is the main jack for the pickups out of this guitar. Your 1/4 inch, from what I can tell, is actually only your piezo pickup. So if you wanted to run that to a dedicated acoustic amp, because they tend to sound a little bit better that way, you could in fact do that. So once you get those two connected in your guitar, you have to come down to the pedal. You cannot use this guitar without the pedal. So don't buy one if it's missing. Because rather than just a wah pedal, this is acting as like a central hub. Because here's where your MIDI goes. Here's where the power supply goes. And then you've got the input and output over here. And if you want to run a different pedal, it looks like it comes out of the top. You go through there, then it goes to your amp. Also, keep in mind over here, there's a volume control. Let's just say, through a regular electric guitar amp, you might need to use that to tame the piezo a bit. So hopefully that helps someone. So we'll start, no electronics, just the pickups themselves. That's your neck pickup. It's really full and round sounding. Now it does seem that your tone filter over here does indeed work in this positioning. If you wanted to fatten up even more. But now here's our bridge pickup. Now we'll try both pickups together in phase. Same thing, but out of phase. Now to say I'm impressed with those tones, yeah, not really. They're not my favorite, but they're usable. They're not awful. I actually really like the out of phase. It's not quite as quacky as usual. But don't forget we have piezo only. I've got to say, I think that's my favorite tone on this guitar so far, which is saying a lot. Imagine that through a dedicated acoustic amp. It might even be better. So if you're looking for a great piezo electric guitar, you might enjoy this. Now also keep in mind, I've had the piezo blend off. So once again, neck pickup. You can put a little bit of piezo in with that. Now, how nice does that sound in the room? Not good at all, but you could, in theory, run that to a different amp if you had like a splitter cable. And utilizing a Red Rocks distortion pedal, here's what it sounds like dirty. Again, you wouldn't normally think piezo with a distortion pedal equals a good time, but you got some sweet leads there. But now it's time to turn our VO power on. So all of our fancy stuff are going to work. We're going to start in full sustain mode. So that means every note you play will sustain and get that harmonic feedback. So this. And you can tame that with the VO power if you think that's too much. And our mini toggle is in the full tone mode. So in this position, I'm utilizing the foot switch. You can do tone sweeps. Now we'll try the controlled sustain. So in theory, only the notes you're playing should ring out. So it's like the last note that you play. Whereas your next mode is that muted mode. So in theory, it's trying to take away the energy from all the strings. For example, here's how much the guitar sustains normally. Honestly, not the greatest, but with the mute mode, much quicker. From the other demos I saw online, I was expecting that to be way choppier. Let's mess around with the different filters. So we go from normal to our next one, which is the MOOG Articulator. In this particular mode, my foot switch is not doing anything. It's kind of like what the pedal was just doing, but it automatically happens. So it's like an auto-wah in a way. Seems to mainly be activated by your bass notes. That's actually good to know. It doesn't seem like these effects work with the piezo. So when you blend it in, you get some normal tones. Okay, I think that's where the magic is on this guitar. Now let's try the ladder filter. So right now, the foot pedal, it takes it from normal and kind of adds that overtones to it. Kind of like a swell. So you can tame the harmonic overtones. So there we go, the Moog E-1. What are my final thoughts on this? As far as like an electric guitar, didn't really enjoy the tones all that much. It's kind of a stiffer feeling guitar to play, but I think that's because we have slightly heavier gauge strings than I'm used to. But I was glad I was able to get the neck straightened out. It's just got a little bit of relief now, which is perfect because I let it sit for a couple of days, so we're good there. Some final adjustments to the action could be made depending on someone's personal preferences. But for me, I view this more of like an interesting ambient noise guitar. Like I could imagine a different guitar player could get a lot more out of this than I could. However, at the same time, I would like to experiment with it more, off camera when things aren't rolling and I feel pressured to perform. Because as far as upper fret access, yeah, you can get to it. It's really blocky. I wouldn't say it feels like a Stratocaster. It's just like its own thing because it's rather heavy. I did notice the longer and longer I was playing it, the more the back heats up. Now, it's not like, ouch, it's burning me, but it's like, oh, yeah, I can tell something's getting warm in there. But ultimately, would this be a daily player for me? Nah, it'd more so be a special occasion or when the song calls for something like this. Because I wasn't inspired by the regular pickup sound, but can see how the additional effects could be beneficial to the right guy. So all that aside, if you need a dedicated piezo guitar, honestly, that's the one thing I will remember about this. Yeah, the whole EBO harmonic sustains, it's cool, but I think the piezo, whatever they've done in here, actually sounds really, really good. So I'm glad I was able to check out the Moog E-1. I hope this helps you make an informed decision whether one of these old rarities is something you might want to explore. Otherwise, I hope you just enjoyed checking it out with me today. If you're interested in being the next owner of this particular one, it will be available on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. And otherwise, we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.